Another example of the swamp, people really related to that argument that you made. You see it now with what's going on with Boeing, right?
Right.
That you talked about the military-industrial complex.
Right, sure.
We know that they're planes, the civilian planes, but they're a big part of that government machinery. What do you think of what's going on there? I mean, every day it seems like we get a story about Boeing that is very worrying in terms of what they may have covered up.
Well, I feel very badly for Boeing. I think it's one of the great brands of the world, and I've never seen a brand be hurt so badly so fast. That 737 MAX has been a disaster for them. And I guess they're doing a lot of things. But,
what do you think of the CEO? Are you confident that he's the right guy to lead that company out of this?
Well, he was flawless until about 4 months ago when that first plane went down. And I've been saying it. They're making it too complicated. They want to be pilots. They're making airplanes and other equipment. I could tell you stories about ships that we're building. They always think they have to up it. And eventually, you have to graduate first in your class at MIT to fly an airplane. They're making it too complicated, and what they're doing is making it too dangerous. It's no good. And I told that to Dennis Muilenburg at Boeing, who you're talking about. Dennis is a good man. He's had a great career, and the last 4 months have been a disaster for him.
So you've got Nikki Haley on the board there.
Yeah.
What would you hope that she'd be doing?
Well, I think she can help him a lot. She's very talented. She's a good person. She was great with me and did a really good job at the United Nations. She's already supported us. But I think she can do a good job.
Okay.
I think it's good to have her on the board. I think she can help.
All right, since our original Boeing Swamp Watch, new details have emerged about the faulty technology in their 737 MAX airplane. It turns out that Boeing knew about a problem with safety features before the 2 crashes that killed hundreds of innocent people. In 2017, their engineers discovered a problem with the key safety indicator months before delivering their first 737 MAX planes to clients. Boeing conducted an internal safety review, decided the problem was no big deal, and chose not to communicate the problem to their clients or regulators at the FAA until, of course, hundreds of people were killed. Then they thought it might be worth disclosing the flaw. But even after reviewing the issue, the FAA declared the issue to be, quote, low risk. And that's not all. Recently unveiled audio recordings from a private meeting show that the American Airlines Pilot Union confronted Boeing executives over possible safety issues in the 737 MAX just a few months before the deadly crash in Ethiopia. All of this raises new questions about what else Boeing has known and failed to disclose about the safety of their planes. Look, Boeing is a great American company with many thousands of workers who are among the best in the world, but Boeing's leadership is obviously now crooked, self-serving, and shockingly irresponsible. They must be held accountable. All right, Charlie, you followed this all along.
And it's really important to realize this is not the market at work. This is cronyism at work. Mm-hmm. And you look at the self-dealing is the perfect way to put it. The access to government contracts, the monopolization they have on the American manufacturing industry for airlines. There's only really 2 firms in the world that can make the type of planes that they make, the transcontinental airlines, and that would be Airbus in France and Boeing in America. And I like to think we're the country that's so rich, a $20 trillion GDP, 330 million Americans. We have one company that can do that. That just goes to show that the tax dollars should be always diffused and decentralized when you bid for these contracts.
Such an important point. That's so much the thing that's gone wrong in so many parts of the economy, this centralization, not enough competition.
That's so true. And I think for me, I fly frequently, you fly frequently. We put our lives in the hands of these companies. This is not just about a flaw in something that won't harm anyone. This is about hundreds of people on board an aircraft with their children, with their family members, entrusting their lives to the people who make these planes. And unfortunately for Boeing and their executives, just as you said, Steve, they withheld information that could have saved people's lives. I mean, this is probably one of the most grotesque moves a company like this could make. And you're right, Boeing, love Boeing. My father was a mechanic on aircraft. Sure. He worked on the AWACS. My father always talked about, the safety issues on a plane. So for me, to think that Boeing can do that, those are the questions that I want to know. How much more has been withheld from the American public? And what are we expecting of our corporations? And you're right, it's cronyism, but it doesn't stop there. We need to know what's going on, and they need to be honest with us.
And there's a super deep point here, and you talk about this in your book. When you don't have competition, you get lazy.
That's right.
You stop being your best version of yourself. So Boeing has not had that kind of competition for years. So they got to this level where they have endless tax dollars coming, where they spend more money on public affairs and lobbying than on research and development. Mm-hmm. And than actually making sure their products are the best in the world. And what you talk about in your book, we've talked about in the show many times, decentralization, competition, entrepreneurship will make the products better, but also give a better value for the taxpayer and hopefully end up saving
And
lives.
they're a really, really great, well, terrible example of what we talk about all the time on Swamp Watch, the revolving door. The executive, I mean, they're literally, I can't remember the exact details, but the head of safety at Boeing ends up becoming the head of safety at the FAA.
That's
the regulator, or something
research
like
and development. Research and development. The problems with that, we've seen that not only in the private sector, we've seen it in the public sector with the Pentagon and with the Department of Defense, where you have, these contracts that are these open-ended contracts with very few bidders, with very little competition, and people are putting out products that are sub because they're just not competition out there to put out the best product.
I would venture a guess that if President Trump did a press conference and he said the $10 billion or whatever it is will now be open bid, you'll have entrepreneurs from all over our country saying, I'll do it. I have expertise. I used to work for Boeing. I can have a competitor. Allow the market to solve these problems. Don't rely on Washington, D.C. to do it.
That's a great idea. If anyone's watching with the power to make that happen, I would say go for it. All right, coming up, our interview with President Trump made headlines for his comments on everything from Iran to Mayor Pete. Up next, I want to break down some of the key moments and explain what they tell us about this president. Don't go away.